All right, so what are some of the things that can go wrong? We've talked about power failure, yeah? If the power failure is 4 hours or less, yeah, and sometimes I've actually had calls from practices going, we've been told that they're going to turn off the electricity for the next 2 hours. What do we do? Nothing. Make sure that you keep the fridge door closed, because it's about keeping the cold in there. Yeah? Put a sign or whatever you need to do to let people know, keep that fridge door closed, and keep monitoring, actually. Keep it closed and keep monitoring to make sure that they're not getting too hot. If it's going to be over 4 hours, yeah, we then store the vaccines in a cooler with conditioned ice packs. What's a conditioned ice pack?
One that doesn't go wet when it melts.
Well, we'll have a chat about what, yeah, because this is a different concept. It's not just putting any old ice pack in there. We actually have to condition the ice packs when they're going to be going into coolers, not just for power failures and things like that, but also when we're taking them out to do flu shots on workplaces and things like that. So we'll actually go over that as well. Continue to monitor the temperature with your free moving thermometer. That's why it's handy to have. And that's it. Any questions about power failures? Yes?
We have the space blankets.
Yeah.
If we have a power failure or there's a disruption of the phone, if you put the ice packs in the bottom of the fridge, put the space blanket on it.
Okay, yes.
The glass door that goes up really quickly.
Yeah, the things with the glass door fridges will lose temperature really quickly. Yeah. So if you can find a way of insulating it, yeah, but keep making sure that you're keeping it shut. I heard there was a doctor once that would throw, like a blanket over the fridge. I would be keep a really close eye if you're doing something like that, because there's obviously all sorts of exhausts and things trying to get out for the heat. You can then overheat the fridge, or you can actually start a fire, which is the last thing. Yeah, to prevent the. Yeah. Now, which fridge? This is a pop quiz. Which fridge? A pop quiz about an answer that I haven't given you yet. Would be trickier to make stable? One that has too many vaccines, or one that has too few vaccines? Too few. If you have very few vaccines, it's actually really tricky to keep a stable temperature. So what would you do in that instance if you only have one shelf's worth? Bottle of water. So you're increasing your cold mass, yeah? So we'd start putting either gel packs or ice packs that are not frozen, yeah, because we don't want the frozen packs in the fridge, otherwise they're going to bring the temperature right down. So we'd put bottles of water, or increase the cold mass, yeah? Good. Now, cold chain breach. Actually, I do want to, we'll start talking about cold chain breach. What are some of the things that we would do? When is a cold chain breach a breach? What makes a cold chain breach? Temperature has gone below 2 or above 8. Knowing that we have that space above 8 to go to up to 12 for up to 15 minutes. So that's okay. Yeah? What do we do when that happens? What's the first thing that we do when we notice our fridge temperature says minimum was 1? Put a sign. So the first thing is isolate the vaccines. We're quarantining them. We do not get rid of them yet. Yeah? We just put a sign to let people know, do not use these vaccines, because we're waiting for advice on what to do with them. We're going to keep them refrigerated. Don't take them out, put them in the bin, or put them somewhere else. Keep them refrigerated in that 2 to 8 degree range. Then we contact the Department of Health. Anyone know what the phone number is? I have it on my phone. It's on speed dial if I ever needed to. Yeah, it's on the fridge. It's actually, I'll actually give it to you in case you don't have it. It's a 1-300 number, 1-300-182. Let me have a look. 1-300-882-008. Again, that's 1-300-882-008. Who do you talk to when you call that? Anyone know what they're called? The nurses there? Talk to them a lot. Essentially two.
Is it Rose?
Yeah, there's Rose, yeah, and Helen. They're usually the two, and they're both lovely.
Is that the same place you ring up for childhood immunisation?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
normal.
So they're the immunisation nurses of the Department of Health. Now it's very tricky sometimes to get a hold of them because they work part-times and you can't get. Sorry, what was this? It's tricky, and sometimes, yeah, there's afternoons when they might not be there. They have a system where you can leave a message, and they're usually pretty good at calling you back. So don't just hang up if you got the voicemail. Just leave a message, leave your number, name, and they'll usually be pretty good at ringing you back. And same, obviously, they're not there over the weekend. So if you have a breach over the weekend, it becomes a bit tricky because it means that over that weekend you shouldn't really be immunizing until you get advice on what to do. Quarantine and wait for advice.
Is that the only place you can ring? Because sometimes they just say...
Very good question.
Yeah, and that's it. So if you had a breach at 3:30, you have to wait till 10 o'clock the next morning.
Yeah. So there's... The question was, is that the only place that you can ring? For the government vaccines, yes. They're the only ones that can advise you on the government vaccines. They will not, however, advise you on your private stock. Who do you call if you're stocking private vaccines? The supplier, yeah. So you'd ring your CSL or your Sanofi and you'd find out, this is the temperature that the vaccine fridge reached. Do I need to discard them? What do I do with these? Okay, that's it. So we contact the manufacturer for advice. And then we fill out the breach form. Who's had to fill this out before? Yes, fun times. This is what they look like. So it's 2 pages, essentially. The first one has all the details around your practice, how long was the fridge out of range. That's where it'll ask you what type of fridge you have. And then you can't really see them all that well, but these are all on the website, on the Immunise Australia website, on the Department of Health, but I can also send you an email of these. And then it has the list of vaccines here, and then you'd say how many doses we had in stock, and that's what they'll use to then advise, okay, get rid of these ones, or move the expiry date forward for these other ones, okay? Or recall any patients that were administered this vaccine. Now, how we pack a cooler. When we pack a cooler correctly, we can store vaccines for up to 8 hours. Yeah? That's pretty good. Not so good if you're going to be down for 2 days, if they're going to have the electricity out for 2 days. If you had a system, if you have a problem like that, where you know that there's not going to be power for a couple of days, what would you do? You would probably look at finding alternative storage for those vaccines. So trying to get another fridge, especially if you have the advantage of knowing beforehand that this is going to happen. Get another vaccine, get another fridge where you start gauging the temperature so you get it in range. Yeah, because it's usually going to be a domestic fridge that we'll be moving them into unless you find a nearby clinic that's got the space in the fridge, which is tricky. But it's usually going to be a domestic fridge where, yeah, let's get it to the right temperature and then look at moving them there.
Will the government take them back?
I don't think so. No. The logistics of taking it back would just be, too much. So if you have a cooler, you can stay, you can pack them in there for up to 8 hours. You should really chill it before you're going to be using, before you're actually going to be putting the vaccines in it. You should try and get the space, the container, to the right temperature and range before we chuck the vaccines in there. Otherwise, we're going blind and hoping that they don't go out of range. What do you think would happen more easily with coolers? Getting too hot or getting too cold? Too cold. They'll usually freeze within the first 2 hours. That's the most dangerous time with coolers. So that's the time where we would want to be monitoring most carefully. Now, what are some of the materials that we use to insulate? And this is the cheat sheet is what they're coming in when they get delivered. What do they come in, the vaccines, to help insulate? The polystyrene, the little chips. Yeah, what else? Sometimes bubble wrap. What's the problem with bubble wrap? it doesn't really necessarily let air flow. Yeah? So you're always better off using polystyrene or shredded paper or something like that. You can use bubble wrap, but just make sure that if you're wrapping things, don't wrap things too tightly, because otherwise air won't be able to flow and get in. Yeah? Now the freeze-sensitive vaccines, so pretty much all of them except the MMR, should be packed towards the middle of the container, yeah, so that they're cocooned. Yeah? So things like your flu shots, your everything else, all your childhood vaccines, they should really be not touching the ice packs. We need to have a min-max thermometer and a freeze indicator. You don't have to have the freeze indicator, but it's a good idea. This is what often comes in with when we get it delivered, yeah? In the center of the vaccine stock, because that's what we want to keep track of, the most sensitive ones. And we want to surround, as I said, the vaccines with the material that's going to let the cold air circulate. Okay? The conditioned ice packs, we want to put them on the top and on the bottom, and ideally with an insulating layer in between. So you can put them at the bottom, and I think I have a, yeah, I have a photo in a bit.
So what do you put, if you put one at the bottom, what do you put between the conditioned ice pack and the vaccine?
Yep, so you could put either a sheet. Yeah, so one of the things is the smallest size that you should be using for a cooler is actually a 10-liter one. Shouldn't be using something that's too small. That's not going to be able to, it's not going to be stable enough. Yeah, should be using at least a 10-liter one, which is like 30 centimeters or so, 30 by 20 something, yeah? So you'd have your conditioned ice packs at the bottom. Just very quickly, we don't want them obviously to be, we don't want the vaccines to be in direct contact with the ice packs. And we're monitoring the whole time. But here's an example. So you'd have your pack at the bottom, your ice pack at the bottom, and then you should have a little layer of an insulating material, like you can have polystyrene, so a little, or just put some of the chips, the polystyrene chips, or your bubble wrap or whatever, in between that ice pack at the bottom and the vaccines. Yeah? Towel, not really ideal, because again, like it'll get wet, it'll, yeah, it's not great for circulation, yeah. In this example, they've got bubble wrap there, which you can use, but yeah, it's better to use the chips and things like that. So if you have a small cooler, you'd put some at the bottom, and then a layer of protection of something. Then you have your vaccines. There you have your freeze indicator, which is this one, which you would have seen coming in with your vaccines. Now you don't have to use them. It's a good idea. This is more if you're doing outreach stuff and you're taking them out a
but
fair
when you get
bit.
with the deliveries, there's no point in keeping that, is it?
No, because then once you get them with the delivery,
that's it.
what's the problem? What should they look like?
Clear.
Yeah, they should be clear. What does this mean? It means that it's frozen. Like it actually reached less than 0. Yeah. So if you ever get a delivery and your indicator looks like this, immediately stop the delivery man and say, no, we're not able to take this. Send it back, or contact the Department of Health immediately and say the vaccines that were delivered or your supplier came frozen.
So we should be making him stand there and wait while we actually open it and check it.
They won't do that.
They won't do it. If they don't do it, as long as you call immediately as soon as you find out. Yeah. Obviously, if you have a setup where they've been left in an inbox overnight, you probably won't have much to. But this won't happen in those ones. There's often 2 types of indicators. This is for freezing, because obviously you won't, like that'll look fine the morning after. Yeah, because it won't have frozen overnight if it's sitting on an inbox on a tray. But sometimes they also have the indicator about if it's reaching hotter temperatures. It's less common, yeah. This is the most common. So with a small container, we'd have, should already be, do we have a tea? I'll just do this quickly. With a small container, we'd have an ice pack at the bottom and one at the top. Yeah? With a bigger container, we'd put them at the top and at the bottom, but also possibly on the sides. Yeah? So on the sides, and again, with insulating chips or material in between so that they're not touching the vaccines.
By condition, do you mean you're just using the insulation?
I will talk about how we
Right, so
condition
that still covers
the
it.
ice packs. Yes. We've been talking about conditioned ice packs. What do we mean when we talk about conditioned ice packs? Does anyone know, actually? Has anyone been involved with? So, with ice packs, we know that we can have them frozen and we can have them just cool or chilled, the fridge temperature. When we talk about conditioning them, if we're going to use them as the source to cool down our cooler or esky, we should really follow this process. We need to freeze them first. Yeah? We need to freeze them fully, and that should usually take about 12 hours in a freezer or about 24 hours in the freezing compartment of a domestic fridge. Okay? So it's between 12 and 24 hours because we want to make sure that they're frozen through and through. Then, they're not ready then to actually condition them. What we do is we remove them from the freezer, we lay them out on a single row, ideally on their side, so on this side, because that's on their back, like that's on their back, like this is on the side, not like that, like this. Then we should have at least 5 centimeters around each pack, just so that they're not, if they're too close together, then they're just going to keep cooling one another. So just lay them out outside, and we'd wait until they begin to sweat. Okay? So it should take about 1 hour if it's in a room temperature of about 20 degrees, and obviously a lot less if it's a really hot day. And it's going to be conditioned or ready as soon as water begins to slosh inside them. So when you move them around and you can hear a bit of water, that's when they're conditioned. Yeah? Is this news to people? Yes, yes. So, there you go. And that's been in our guidelines since forever. Like those guidelines are now. There you go. So now you know how you condition ice packs. We need to freeze them first. They're not ready when they're frozen. Pull them out. So we really, if we're going to be going out and to do off-site vaccinations, we need at least that hour of preparation once we know that we have the frozen packs frozen. Yeah.
Does it have to be that sort of frozen pack, or can it be the ones that they supply you with in the...
Like the gel packs?
Okay,
the gel packs are slightly different in that they might take, they often take longer to freeze all the way, and often on the pack it'll say how long.
Oh.
Yes. How long? And on the guidelines, in your guidelines, the guidelines actually include, again, it's a world of information in here that you never knew existed. And everyone, like when I went out and did the interviews to see where everybody, where everyone was at and how comfortable people felt, everyone knew about this book. Everyone could say, yes, Strive for 5 is what we use. They're here. So actually page 34 has information on the gel packs. So with gel packs, again, it's a rule of thumb, but it'll vary from gel pack to gel pack. It actually has the size. If the size is bigger than 750 grams, then it needs to be probably 1.5 hours it'll take for them to defrost or to get to that slushy. Yeah. If they're less than 750 grams, then probably 45 minutes to 1 hour. But you actually have images there comparing the size so that you get a bit of so they have a mobile phone, an old school Nokia, because they didn't have iPhones back then, and a pen. So you can see, oh yeah, ours is about that size. All right, that's in there, page 34. Again, this is something that we would only really do if we are, if we're taking them off-site, or if we have to move them into a container because there's going to be a power outage. If we're going to have to act in a very short time frame, what does this mean then? What should we be doing beforehand?
Have frozen ice packs.
Yes, so we should have frozen ice packs ready to go. Because if we have a power outage, we now won't have 24 hours to freeze a pack to condition properly to put a cooler together. Yeah. So ideally, we should have in our practice a set of ice packs that are kept frozen, or gel packs that are kept frozen, so that it only takes an hour to defrost. How long did we say that they can stay, that the vaccines can stay in the fridge? 4 hours. So if we need an hour to condition it, and we have 4 hours of vaccines in the fridge, we've got room to move. Yeah? All right. Now, we've been talking about this self-audit. How do we do it? So it's actually Appendix 1 of your Stratford 5. And it is on page, I think it's 36. There you go, page 36. The first appendix is the checklist. Yeah? So it starts out with essentially basic information. Oh, you know, this is why you need to do it. This is where you put the date. What I would recommend is if you have the hard copy, just photocopy those pages, and then we'd do one of those every year. And that's what we would show to the accreditation surveyor, along with our records of our temperatures that we take daily or twice daily. Yeah? So there's several parts to this. One is the basic information that just has, okay, the date, who did the audit, and then the basic thing around procedures. So have all staff received training? Who's the person in charge? Do we have a policy around this? Then it goes into equipment. And in equipment, it actually has two sections. There's one for domestic refrigerators, yeah, a checklist and list of questions if you have domestic refrigerators. And then there's one for purpose-built refrigerators. Obviously, if you only have a purpose-built refrigerator, you can skip the domestic questions and then just go to the second page. If you have a domestic refrigerator, you can skip the purpose-built questions, but make sure that you still tick at the bottom, there's the alternative vaccine storage option. You still need to fill that one out. Okay? So just go through all those pages of Appendix 1. So it's pages 36 to 38. If you have the PDF, then it's very easy because you can just print those pages out as many times as you need them. One every 12 months, and away you go. Any questions about that? Do you want me to go through what are the questions in the audit check? Or a couple? Okay. So, the questions include, well, we have things here. So, all staff have received training to enable them to possess the knowledge to look after cold chain procedures. Yes, no. And they're all just yes, no, or not applicable. So it's very quick and easy to go through them. Is a record available that shows that we're monitoring vaccines? Yes, no, and we should all be having this because it's all our daily or twice daily checks. Is there a record available that says that we're checking at the end of each working day? Yes, no, but now it says it does say minimum requirement is daily. So it's not that this is required, it's just that it's recommended. Okay? Is there a valid documented reason if monitoring has been missed? So on a day where we didn't take the vaccine, is there a valid reason for it? Is it because the practice was closed that day? Perfectly valid reason. If it was because, oh, the nurse wasn't in that day, and it's usually the nurse who does it, and the reception staff didn't know about it or couldn't be bothered, it means that we need to train that reception staff. If the practice is open and we're administering vaccines, we need to check before we administer on that day that those vaccines are viable. Yeah? Were any breaches, any deviations outside the +2 to +8 reported to the appropriate state or territory health department, to our Department of Health? Yes or no? So that's obviously if we've had any breaches. Do we have documentation that, yep, we rang, this is what they said, this is what they advised to do? Have we actually acted on the recommendations? And I don't actually have the page 2, so I'll just tell you. With the domestic fridges, they want to know, when was the battery for the thermometer or data logger last changed? Yeah?
So is this a daylight saving change it back?
They just want the date. So this is what you'd be doing once a year. Once a year. Yeah, you don't have to review your whole policy and procedure, man. Once a year, go through this checklist, go, oh, yeah. I have no idea when the last time was that we changed the battery on that. We should check. Date and results of checking the accuracy of your thermometer. So what would that be referring to? The slurry test. Or a data logging. Yeah. So that's what you could put there. And it actually says do at least 12 monthly. So do it once at least in the year. And see how to check the accuracy on your thermometer. It says page 22. That's the slurry test. Yeah. If you're using a cyclic defrost refrigerator, when was it last defrosted? Again, that's just for domestic fridges. Has the refrigerator shown any evidence of malfunction? For example, poor seals or ice building up? If yes, what action did you take? Is the temperature probe of your thermometer placed as recommended? And the recommendation is how? In a box with the vaccine. So you're mimicking the vaccine conditions. And it actually tells you, yep, it actually says go to page 14 for what we mean for that. So it actually does, yeah, it's very useful.
Where should it be, the probe in the box?
So inside the box. So
in the middle of the fridge.
just like, yeah, in the middle of the fridge amongst the other vaccines. So just where you would have your other vaccines. That's why with this one, see how I marked it around? I put, what do you call it, tape all around it. And I wrote on it, and you can often write do not remove or something, because sometimes a doctor will think, oh, this is a vaccine, oh no, it isn't, and then they'll leave it outside, or they'll pull it out. So if you write on it so that it's clear, do not remove, or thermometer here, then you're saving yourself the trouble. Is there an appropriate gap between the vaccines? Yeah, so this is all stuff that we've covered today. None of this is news and wild, crazy stuff. Are the vaccines stored in enclosed plastic containers? If they are they prepared according to these guidelines? They don't have to be in plastic containers, but as we've said before, they have to be in their original packaging. Can the refrigerator continue to store the volumes of vaccines that we're needing safely? Yeah? If we're all of a sudden, we come to this thing, actually, the clinic is getting quite busy now, and this is looking way more full than it was a year ago. It's probably now time to look at getting a bigger fridge or getting a purpose-built fridge, because again, these are still domestic fridge questions. Are there enough water bottles or ice packs or gel packs on the door and the lower drawer to keep the cold mass in place? Now, for the purpose-built, the questions are, has the refrigerator shown any evidence of malfunction? For example, any poor seals? Again. And most clinics will do a yearly audit, like they'll have a maintenance person come in and check. Is there an appropriate gap between the vaccines? If you're using a thermometer or data logger, when was the last time the battery was changed? And then can the refrigerator continue to store the volume of vaccines? It's fairly straightforward. Yeah? And then finally, we have that alternative vaccine storage section, which is just two questions. Is there an alternative available for vaccine storage? So yes or no, if necessary. And are ice packs, gel packs at the correct temperature available? That's it. Nowhere does it say you have to do a data logging. Nowhere does it say that. The audit itself, going through this checklist, is what's required. Yeah?